3 minutes. That is exactly how long it takes to destroy a legacy built over 50 years. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Heavy Industries, was sitting at the most expensive table in Manhattan, watching his empire burn because of a missing translator. He had the contract, he had the capital, and he had the ambition. But he didn't have the words. Across from him sat the most dangerous industrialist in Europe, a man known for eating CEOs for breakfast. Julian was sweating through his $3,000 shirt, unaware that his salvation wasn't in his boardroom. It was standing 10 feet away, holding a dirty rag and a pot of coffee, and she was about to teach him a lesson he would never forget. The air inside Le Ciel, Manhattan's most exclusive French restaurant, was usually scented with truffle oil and old money. Tonight, however, the table in the private alcove smelled distinctly of panic. Julian Thorne checked his Patek Philippe watch for the 4th time in a minute. The crystal face reflected the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. 7:58 p.m. Where is he? Julian hissed, leaning toward his personal assistant, a young man named Brad, who looked like he might faint. Brad, you told me Sterling was the best translator in the city. You said he was reliable. He is, sir. He was, Brad stammered, tapping furiously on his tablet. His agency said he got into a car accident on the way here. They're sending a backup, but the Germans are walking through the door right now, Julian said, his voice a low growl that vibrated in his chest. And I don't speak a word of German beyond Volkswagen and kindergarten. Julian Thorne was a man used to control. At 38, he had taken his father's mid-sized manufacturing firm and turned it into a global logistics titan. He was handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with jet-black hair and eyes that usually assessed weakness. But tonight, he was the weak one. He was meeting Heinrich von Faust. The von Faust Group was the gatekeeper to the European industrial sector. A partnership with them meant Thorne Industries would dominate the market for the next century. A failure meant Thorne's competitors, specifically the vultures at Blackwood Capital, would swoop in and buy Julian out for pennies on the dollar. Pull it together, Julian whispered to himself. Across the room, standing near the service station, Elena Vance tightened the strings of her apron. She watched the man in the corner, Julian Thorne, with a mix of pity and annoyance. Table 4 is going to be a nightmare, Elena muttered, grabbing a pitcher of ice water. Why? Because it's Julian Thorne, her coworker Sarah whispered back, balancing a tray of escargot. He's gorgeous. I'd let him yell at me. He looks like a man who's about to drown, Elena observed, her green eyes narrowing. She brushed a stray lock of chestnut hair behind her ear. At 26, Elena had the kind of sharp, symmetrical face that belonged on a magazine cover, but she hid it behind zero makeup, a baggy uniform, and a demeanor that screamed, "Do not perceive me. Just keep the water full and don't make eye contact," Elena said. "I have a feeling blood is about to be spilled." Elena walked toward the table just as the hostess led the guests in. Heinrich von Faust was a mountain of a man. He was in his 60s, with silver hair cut with military precision and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was flanked by 2 younger men, his sons presumably, who looked like leaner, hungrier versions of their father. They didn't smile. They didn't shake hands. They simply sat down. Julian stood up, buttoning his jacket, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Herr von Faust, a pleasure, truly. Heinrich stared at him. He turned to his son on the right and said something in rapid, low German. The son smirked. "My father asks," the son said in heavily accented English, "if you plan to conduct business standing up or if American efficiency has been replaced by anxiety." Julian blinked. Right, please, sit." They sat. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a diamond. "So," Julian started, looking around for Brad, who was uselessly refreshing his email. "My translator seems to be delayed. A minor traffic incident. But surely we can begin? I know your English is excellent." Heinrich's eyes went cold. He spoke again in German, his voice a deep rumble. "Wenn nicht einmal die Sprache der Ehre spricht, Warum sollten wir IHM unser Erbe anvertrauen? Elena, pouring water into Heinrich's glass, froze for a millisecond. Her hand didn't shake, but her breath hitched. If he does not even speak the language of honor, why should we entrust him with our legacy? Julian laughed nervously. I assume that was a joke. A good German joke? The son translated, but he changed the meaning. My father says he is disappointed. He expected better preparation. That wasn't what he said, Elena thought. He's testing you, you idiot. He's talking about honor, not preparation. She finished pouring and stepped back into the shadows. She needed this job. She needed the tips. She did not need to get involved in a billionaire's ego trip. She had spent 2 years running away from this world. The world of high-stakes negotiations, lies, and corporate warfare. She was just a waitress now. But as she watched, the train wreck got worse. We have the projections, Julian said, sliding a thick binder across the table. Thorn Industries can guarantee a 15% reduction in shipping costs within the first quarter. Heinrich ignored the binder. He picked up the menu. He spoke to his son again. Sagt IAM, dass Zahlen ohne Vertrauen nur Tinte auf Papier sind. Ich will wissen, warum seinen letzten Partner in Chicago verraten hat. Elena bit her lip. Tell him that numbers without trust are just ink on paper. I want to know why he betrayed his last partner in Chicago. The son leaned forward, smiling cruelly at Julian. My father asks about the menu. He wonders if the beef is fresh. Elena's eyes widened. The son was sabotaging the deal. He was deliberately mistranslating to keep his father and Julian from connecting. Julian, relieved by the easy question, beamed. Oh, the beef here is world class! The Wagyu is flown in daily. I highly recommend it. Heinrich's face darkened. He had asked about a betrayal in Chicago, and Julian was talking about cows. To Heinrich, this was the ultimate insult. It meant Julian was dodging the question, treating him like a fool. Heinrich slammed his menu shut. The sound echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. This is a waste of time, the son said in English, standing up. My father believes you are not taking this seriously. What? No! Julian stood up, his chair scraping loudly. Please, I am answering his questions. Brad, do something! Brad was hyperventilating. I'm trying to get Google Translate to work, sir, but the connection is bad. Get out of my way! Heinrich barked in English, his voice thick with disdain. He motioned for his sons to rise. We leave. The deal goes to Blackwood. Julian's face went pale. Blackwood! If they got the deal, Thorn Industries was dead. Julian would be destitute. His father's legacy would be chopped up for parts. Please! Julian stepped in front of Heinrich, desperation stripping away his dignity. Just wait 5 minutes. Just listen to the numbers. Move, Heinrich said, his eyes like steel. Elena watched from the service station. She clutched the silver tray against her chest. She remembered the day she lost everything. She remembered the feeling of being silenced, of being misunderstood while powerful men ruined her life. She looked at Julian Thorn. He was arrogant, yes. He was unprepared, yes. But he was being framed by the sun. He was walking into a trap he couldn't see. Don't do it, Elena, she told herself. You're a waitress. You serve bread. You refill water. You do not close billion-dollar mergers. Heinrich took a step toward the exit. Julian looked defeated, his shoulders slumping. Elena let out a sigh that was mostly anger. She walked forward, not with the shuffle of a servant, but with the stride of a predator entering the arena. She stopped directly in front of Heinrich von Faust, blocking his path. Excuse me, sir, she said softly. Julian snapped. Not now. Get out of the way. Elena ignored Julian completely. She looked Heinrich dead in the eye. Herr von Faust, she said, her German flawless, her accent indistinguishable from a native of Hamburg. Bevor Sie gehen, sollten Sie wissen, dass IHR-Sohn Ihre Fragen falsch übersetzt hat. Mr. Thorn hat sie nicht ignoriert. Wurde getauscht. Mr. von Faust. Before you go, you should know that your son has been translating your questions incorrectly. Mr. Thorne was not ignoring you. He was deceived. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. Heinrich von Faust stopped. He looked at the woman in the cheap black uniform, at the ketchup stain on her apron, and then up to her eyes. They were intelligent, fierce, and completely unafraid. "Excuse me?" Julian whispered, looking between Elena and the German Titan. "What did you say?" Heinrich held up a hand to silence Julian. He stepped closer to Elena. He towered over her, but she didn't flinch. "Was hast du gesagt, Mädchen?" "What did you say, girl?" he rumbled. Elena didn't back down. She shifted her weight, her posture changing. She wasn't holding a tray anymore. She was holding the room. "Ich sagte," Elena continued, her voice crisp and authoritative, "dass Sie nach dem Vorfall in Chicago und der Treue gefragt haben. Ihr Sohn hat Mr. Thorne jedoch gefragt, ob das Rindfleisch frisch sei. Mr. Thorne antwortete auf die Frage, die holte, nicht auf die, die Sie stellten. I said that you asked about the incident in Chicago and loyalty. However, your son asked Mr. Thorne if the beef was fresh. Mr. Thorne answered the question he heard, not the one you asked." Heinrich slowly turned his head toward his son on the right. The young man, whose name was Stefan, had gone pale. Sweat was suddenly visible on his upper lip. "First, das war, Stefan?" Heinrich asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Stefan stammered, "Father, she is just a waitress. She doesn't understand the dialect. She is lying to get a tip." Elena laughed. It wasn't a polite waitress laugh. It was a cold, corporate laugh. "A dialect?" She switched to English so Julian could understand. Since when does the Hanseatic dialect confuse corporate betrayal with Wagyu beef? That is not a linguistic error, Stefan. That is sabotage. Julian looked at Elena as if she had just sprouted wings. You speak German?" "I speak 5 languages, Mr. Thorne," Elena said without looking at him. "Right now, I suggest you stop asking questions and start listening, because I just bought you about 30 seconds of curiosity. Do not waste it." Heinrich looked at Stefan, then back to Elena. The old man's eyes narrowed. He was a predator recognizing another predator, regardless of the uniform. "You say my son lies," Heinrich said in heavily accented English. "Why?" "Because," Elena said, "Blackwood Capital likely offered him a seat on their board if he tanked this meeting. It's a standard play in hostile takeovers. Isolate the target, create frustration, force a walkout." She turned to Stefan. "Did they promise you the Asia division, or just a cash payout?" Stefan's face turned red. "You shut your mouth, you servant! Father, are we going to listen to this trash?" Heinrich slapped the table. Bang! The cutlery rattled. "Sit," Heinrich commanded. Everyone sat, even Stefan, who looked like he wanted to strangle Elena. Heinrich pointed a thick finger at Elena. "You. Translate." "I have tables to serve," Elena said coolly. "I will buy the restaurant," Heinrich barked. "Sit. Translate." Elena hesitated. This was dangerous. If she sat down, if she engaged, she was stepping back into the light. People might recognize her. But the adrenaline was humming in her blood. It had been so long since she had felt the rush of a deal, the geometry of a negotiation. She pulled out a chair and sat. She didn't ask for permission. "Very well," Elena said. She looked at Julian. "Mr. Thorne, you are currently down 10-0. You need to explain the Chicago incident immediately. No fluff. No marketing talk. The truth." Julian was reeling. He felt like a passenger in his own car. The Chicago partnership ended because they were cooking the books. I found out they were inflating assets to secure loans. I pulled the plug to protect my investors, even though it cost me a short-term loss. Elena nodded. She turned to Heinrich. She didn't just translate words. She translated intent. She used the precise financial terminology that signaled competence. Hat die Partnerschaft beendet, weil Unregelmäßigkeiten in der Bilanzierung entdeckt hat. Es war eine Entscheidung für die Integrität, nicht gegen den Profit. hat den kurzfristigen Verlust in Kauf genommen, langfristige Stabilität zu garantieren. Heinrich listened. He watched Julian's face while Elena spoke. For the first time, the old German nodded. Good, Heinrich grunted. Integrity is rare. He looked at Elena. Now, the logistics. The microconductors we need, shipped from Stuttgart to Shenzhen. The timeline is impossible. 3 days. Thorne says he can do it. How? Julian looked at Elena. Tell him about the new automated routing system. The AI integration. Elena shook her head. No. Excuse me? Julian blinked. Don't tell him about the AI, Elena said, her voice low. Old-school industrialists like von Faust don't trust algorithms. They trust infrastructure. Tell him about your dedicated freight lanes and the priority contracts you signed with the port authorities in Hamburg. But the AI is the selling point. Julian argued. The AI is a toy to him, Elena snapped. The contracts are the muscle. Do you want the deal, or do you want to be right? Julian stared at her. Her eyes were hard, green flint. He realized with a jolt that this waitress understood his business better than he did. Fine, Julian breathed. Tell him about the Port Authority contracts. Elena turned back to Heinrich. She spoke of logistics chains, customs pre-clearance, and bonded warehouses. She spoke with a rhythm and confidence that mesmerized the table. For the next hour, the restaurant disappeared. The rude customers at table 6 were ignored. The manager, seeing what was happening, wisely kept the other staff away. It was a master class. Elena parried Stefan's snide interruptions with brutal efficiency. When Stefan tried to claim Thorne lacked liquidity, Elena recalled a financial report she had read in the Financial Times 2 weeks ago regarding Thorne's recent bond issuance, correcting him on the spot. Julian watched her in awe. She wasn't reading from a script. She was improvising, strategizing, and closing. She was magnificent. Finally, Heinrich leaned back. He took a sip of his wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux that cost more than Elena's car. Enough, Heinrich said. The table went silent. Stefan looked hopeful. Julian looked nauseous. Heinrich reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold fountain pen. He took the contract from the center of the table, flipped to the last page, and signed it. He pushed the paper toward Julian. We do business, Heinrich said. Julian felt like he might cry. $1 billion. Saved. Heinrich stood up. He didn't look at Julian. He looked at Elena. You are wasted here, the German said. I like the free coffee, Elena replied flatly. Heinrich chuckled. A dry, rasping sound. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. It wasn't a business card. It was heavy, black metal, with a single phone number embossed in gold. If you ever tire of serving soup, Heinrich said, call me. I have use for a wolf in sheep's clothing. He turned to his son. Stefan, you will walk back to the hotel. We need to discuss your future. Stefan looked like a ghost as he trailed after his father. When they were gone, the silence rushed back into the booth. Julian sat there, clutching the signed contract. He looked at Elena. She stood up, smoothing her apron. The magic was fading. The corporate shark was retreating, and the tired waitress was returning. I need to go check on table 4, she said, her voice dropping back to a service monotone. They've been waiting for their check. Wait, Julian said, standing up. He reached out, grabbing her wrist, then quickly let go as if he'd been burned. Who are you? Elena looked at him, her expression guarded. I'm Elena, your server. Don't give me that, Julian said, his intensity returning. You speak 5 languages. You know about bond issuances and customs pre-clearance. You just out-negotiated Heinrich von Faust. You are not just a server. Everyone has to pay rent, Mr. Thorne. I'll pay your rent, Julian said impulsively. I'll pay your rent for the next 10 years. Come work for me. Elena's face closed off. A shadow passed over her eyes. Fear, or perhaps shame. No. No. Julian was baffled. I'm offering you a job. Name your salary. Consultant. VP of International Relations. Whatever you want. I can't, she said, backing away. Why? Because people like you destroy people like me, Elena whispered. She turned and walked rapidly toward the kitchen. Julian stood there, stunned. He looked down at the contract. He had won the biggest victory of his career, but all he could think about was the mystery woman disappearing through the swinging doors. He pulled out his phone. Brad. He barked at his assistant, who was cowering in the corner. Yoy. Yes, sir? Cancel my morning meetings. Julian stared at the kitchen door. And get me everything you can find on a woman named Elena Vance. I want to know who she was before she put on that apron. Yes, sir. But why? Julian narrowed his eyes. Because she just saved $1 billion company, Brad, and I have a feeling she's hiding a secret worth even more. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Thorn Tower, but inside the executive suite on the 50th floor, the mood was midnight dark. Julian Thorn had not slept. He had spent the night pacing his office, the signed von Faust contract sitting on his desk like a trophy he hadn't earned. He kept replaying the scene in the restaurant. The way Elena had dissected the German industrialist's logic. The way she had wielded silence like a weapon. At 8 a.m. sharp, the double doors swung open. Brad walked in, carrying a manila folder as if it contained radioactive material. You found her? Julian asked, turning from the window. It wasn't easy, sir, Brad said, placing the folder on the mahogany desk. Elena Vance, 26 years old. Lives in a 4th-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens. Pays her taxes, has a clean record, no parking tickets. Boring, Julian muttered. Dig deeper. That woman in the restaurant wasn't a waitress who pays her taxes. She was a shark. That's the thing, sir, Brad swallowed hard. I ran her face through the image recognition software we use for corporate espionage checks. The name, Elena Vance, is real, but it's an alias she legally adopted 3 years ago. Julian walked over to the desk. Who was she before? Brad opened the folder to reveal a glossy magazine clipping from Forbes, dated 4 years prior. The headline read, The Prodigy. How 22YEA rolled Eleanor Vance is rewriting the rules of M&A. The photo showed a younger Elena. She was wearing a sharp white suit, standing in the boardroom of a massive glass office, looking confident, untouchable, and brilliant. Eleanor Vance. Julian read aloud. The memory clicked. Wait, the Sterling Holt scandal? Exactly. Brad nodded grimly. She was the youngest vice president in the history of Sterling Holt Financial. She was the protege of Silas Sterling, the godfather of Wall Street. She was handling portfolios worth billions before she could legally rent a car. Julian picked up the article. He remembered the headlines now. It had been the biggest financial scandal of the decade. She was accused of insider trading and embezzlement, Julian recalled. $50 million disappeared from a pension fund she managed. The SEC came down on her like a hammer. She was never convicted, Brad corrected. The evidence was circumstantial, but the court of public opinion destroyed her. She was blacklisted. Her assets were frozen, her reputation incinerated. Silas Sterling testified against her, claiming he had no idea what she was doing. She went from being the golden girl to a pariah in 48 hours. Julian stared at the photo. Silas Sterling. Everyone knew Silas Sterling. He was a snake in a handmade suit. If Silas had testified against her, it meant one of two things. Either she was guilty, or she was the fall guy for something much, much bigger. Where is Silas now? Julian asked. That's the twist, sir, Brad said, swiping his tablet to cast a graph onto the wall monitor. Silas Sterling just joined the board of Blackwood Capital. Julian felt a chill run down his spine. Blackwood Capital. The same vultures trying to hostile take over Thorn Industries. The same firm that had tried to sabotage the von Faust deal last night. It connects, Julian whispered. Elena didn't just help me because she speaks German. She helped me because she hates Blackwood. She hates the people who destroyed her. He looked at the address in the file. 42B, Elm Street, Astoria. Sir? Brad asked. What are you going to do? She's a liability. If the press finds out Julian Thorne is associating with the disgraced Eleanor Vance, our stock will tank." Julian grabbed his jacket. He looked at the contract on his desk, the billion-dollar piece of paper that only existed because of her. "The stock is going to tank anyway if Blackwood eats us alive," Julian said, heading for the door. "I don't need a waitress, Brad, and I don't need a translator. I need a weapon. And I think I just found the most dangerous one in New York." "You're going to Queens?" Brad asked, horrified. "No," Julian smiled, a smile that was all teeth. "I'm going to war, and I'm going to recruit my general." The hallway of the apartment building smelled of boiled cabbage and floor wax. It was a far cry from the penthouse suites Julian was used to, but he didn't care. He adjusted the collar of his coat and knocked firmly on door 4B. No answer. He knocked again. "Elena, I know you're in there." "Go away," came a muffled voice from inside. "I'm calling the police." "If you call the police," Julian said, speaking clearly through the wood, "tell them to bring a warrant for Silas Sterling. I have his new board minutes right here." The lock clicked, then the deadbolt slid back. The door opened 3 inches, held by a chain. Elena's face appeared in the gap. She wasn't wearing her uniform now. She wore an oversized gray hoodie and leggings, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She looked tired, vulnerable, and completely unlike the titan who had commanded the restaurant. But the eyes were the same, green, sharp, calculating. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "To talk. About Eleanor Vance." She flinched. The name clearly physically hurt her. She stared at him for a long moment, assessing the risk. Finally, she closed the door to undo the chain, then swung it open. "5 minutes," she said. "Then I scream." Julian stepped inside. The apartment was tiny, a studio with a kitchenette. It was clean, but sparse. A single mattress on the floor, a folding table with a laptop, and stacks of books. Hundreds of books. Advanced game theory, international maritime law, the psychology of negotiation. She hadn't stopped learning. She was just hiding. "Nice place," Julian lied. "Cut the crap, Mr. Thorne," Elena said, leaning against the counter, crossing her arms. "You ran a background check. You know who I am. You know I'm radioactive. If you're here to blackmail me into silence about your business dealings, don't worry. I don't talk to reporters. They don't listen to waitresses anyway." "I'm not here to blackmail you," Julian said. He pulled out the dossier Brad had given him and tossed it onto her folding table. "I'm here to hire you." Elena laughed, a bitter sound. "Hire me? Did you miss the part where I was accused of stealing $50 million from widows and orphans? I can't even get a job as a bank teller, let alone at a Fortune 500 company." "You didn't steal it," Julian stated. Elena froze. "Excuse me?" "I watched you last night," Julian said, stepping closer. "I watched you handle von Faust. You value precision. You value honor. You translated for me when you could have just let me drown. A thief doesn't do that. A thief takes the wallet and runs. You stayed to fix the mess." He looked her dead in the eye. "Silas Sterling framed you." Elena's expression shattered. For a moment, the tough exterior fell away, revealing a deep, festering wound. She looked away, her hands gripping the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. "It doesn't matter what you think," she whispered. "It doesn't matter what the truth is. Silas had the lawyers, the connections, and the narrative. He needed a scapegoat to cover his bad bets in the derivatives market. I was 22. I was naive. I signed papers I trusted him with. By the time I realized what he'd done, the money was in an offshore account with my name on it, and he was the grieving mentor testifying against his greedy student." She looked back at Julian, tears of rage brimming in her eyes. "I lost everything, my license, my friends, my life. I have been working in that restaurant for 3 years trying to disappear. So do not come into my house and tell me you know what happened, unless you have a time machine." "I don't have a time machine," Julian said softly, "but I have a target." He pulled a second file from his coat pocket. He laid it next to her dossier. "Blackwood Capital is launching a hostile takeover of Thorne Industries next week," Julian said. They are going to leverage my debt, manipulate the stock price, and force a buyout. If they win, they dismantle my father's company. Elena glanced at the file. So? Fight them. I can't fight them alone. They play dirty. They plant spies. They bribe regulators. They falsify data. Julian paused. And their new lead strategist for this takeover is Silas Sterling. Elena's head snapped up. The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop. Silas is with Blackwood, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He joined the board yesterday. He's the one orchestrating the attack on me. He's doing to my company what he did to your life. He's going to strip it for parts and walk away with the profit. Julian saw the spark in her eyes. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was hunger, the hunger for retribution. I need a chief strategy officer, Julian said. Someone who knows how Silas thinks. Someone who can predict his moves before he makes them. Someone who isn't afraid to get blood on their hands. I can't, Elena said, shaking her head. I'm blacklisted. The moment you announce my hiring, your stock drops 10%. The shareholders will revolt. Let them revolt, Julian countered. We won't announce you as Eleanor Vance. We'll hire you as an external consultant under a shell corporation. You'll work from the shadows. You'll be my ghost. And what do I get? Elena asked. Besides a salary. You get Silas, Julian said. If we win, if we beat Blackwood, we will have access to their internal servers during the merger discovery phase. We will have access to Silas's private ledgers. You can find the proof that clears your name. Elena went silent. She looked around her small, sad apartment. She looked at the waitress uniform hanging on the back of the door, the uniform of a life she had forced herself to accept. Then she looked at the file on the table. The file that contained the name of the man who had ruined her. You're taking a massive risk, Elena said. If I fail, you lose your company. If I don't hire you, I lose it anyway, Julian said. At least this way we go down swinging. Elena walked over to the window. She looked out at the rainy street. She took a deep breath, inhaling the stale air of the apartment for the last time. She turned back to him. The waitress was gone. Eleanor Vance was back. I don't want a salary, she said, her voice steel. Okay, Julian nodded. Stock options? No, she said. I want 5% of Blackwood Capital when we break them, and I want Silas Sterling's office chair, the leather one. Julian grinned. It was the first genuine smile he had smiled in months. Done. One more thing, Elena said, walking past him to the bathroom door. What? She paused, hand on the doorknob. I need clothes. I burned all my suits. I'll have a stylist at the office in an hour, Julian said. Good, Elena said. Now get out. I need to shower. And Julian? He stopped at the door. Yes? Don't ever keep me waiting, she said. If we're going to kill a giant, we need to be efficient. Julian walked out into the hallway, his heart pounding. He had come looking for a translator. He had just signed a pact with the devil. But as he walked down the stairs, he realized something. For the first time since the takeover threat began, he didn't feel afraid. He felt sorry for Silas Sterling. Monday morning at Thorn Industries was usually a quiet affair. Today, it felt like a bunker before an air raid. In the main conference room, the executive board sat in varying states of agitation. Marcus Thorn, Julian's cousin and the CFO, was pacing the length of the room. He was a man who sweated the small stuff, and right now, the stuff was massive. We are down 12% in pre-market trading, Julian, Marcus shouted, pointing at the ticker tape running along the wall. Blackwood is spreading rumors that we've lost the European contracts. They're driving the price down so they can buy a controlling stake by Friday. We need to issue a press release denial immediately. No press release, a female voice said from the doorway. The room fell silent. Marcus spun around. Who the hell is this? Elena Vance stood there. The gray hoodie and leggings were gone. In their place, she wore a tailored navy power suit that looked like it had been cut from a stormy sky. Her hair was sleek, straight, and sharp enough to cut glass. She held a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. She didn't look like a waitress. She looked like an executioner. Julian stood at the head of the table. This is Elena. She is our new external consultant. Consultant? Marcus scoffed. Julian, We are bleeding millions by the hour, and you bring in a consultant? From where? McKinsey? Bain? From Lucille, Elena said, walking past Marcus and taking the seat at the opposite end of the table, the seat usually reserved for hostile negotiators. She placed her tablet down with a definitive clack. Gentlemen, Elena began, her voice calm and terrifyingly steady. I've reviewed your financials from the last 3 quarters. You are playing defense. That is why you are losing. We are protecting the company, Marcus argued. You are protecting a corpse, Elena shot back. Blackwood Capital is shorting your stock. They are betting money they don't have that Thorn Industries will collapse within 72 hours. If you issue a denial, you just look desperate. The stock drops further, they win. So what do you suggest? Another board member asked, skepticism dripping from his voice. Do nothing? No, Elena smiled, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. We help them. Excuse me, Julian asked, raising an eyebrow. Even he hadn't heard this part of the plan. Elena tapped her tablet, and the main screen changed. It showed a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts. Silas Sterling is leading this attack, Elena said, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. Silas is arrogant. He believes in momentum. If he sees you bleeding, he won't just watch. He'll try to drink the blood. He will over-leverage Blackwood's position to finish you off quickly. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She picked up a red marker. We are going to leak a report, Elena said, drawing a steep downward line. A fake internal memo stating that the Von Faust deal has stalled due to regulatory issues. We will make it look like Thorn Industries is insolvent. Are you insane? Marcus screamed. That will crash the stock. It will go to 0. It will drop to $10 a share, Elena corrected. And when it does, Silas will dump every cent Blackwood has into shorting it further. He will empty their war chest to bury you. He will be exposed, vulnerable. She drew a sharp V shape, the line rocketing back up. And that, Elena said, turning to face them, is when we announce the finalized, signed, and notarized contract with Von Faust, along with a $500 million buyback of our own shares. The room was dead silent as the math hit them. A short squeeze, Julian whispered, realizing the brilliance of it. If the stock rockets up while Silas is betting it goes down, he has to cover his losses. He'll have to buy our stock at the inflated price to pay his debts. Exactly, Elena said. He won't just lose the takeover. He will bankrupt Blackwood Capital in a single afternoon. We don't just survive, we eat them. Marcus looked at the whiteboard, then at Elena. The skepticism was gone, replaced by fear. That is incredibly dangerous. If the timing is off by an hour, we lose everything. Then don't be late, Elena said coolly. She looked at Julian. Get me a secure line. I need to plant the leak. Then Julian? Yes. I need an invitation to the Industrialists' Gala tomorrow night. Why? Julian asked. We should be in the war room. Because, Elena checked her watch, Silas Sterling will be there, and he needs to see you looking defeated. He needs to see the fear in your eyes so he takes the bait. I'm not good at acting defeated, Julian muttered. Elena walked up to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle, like rain and expensive soap. She reached out and straightened his tie, a gesture so intimate and dominant that the entire board looked away. Don't worry, Mr. Thorne, she whispered, her green eyes locking onto his. I'll be right there beside you. Just follow my lead. For the second time in 2 days, Julian Thorne felt like he wasn't the CEO. And for the second time, he didn't mind at all. The Metropolitan Industrialists' Gala was the kind of event where the champagne cost more than a Honda Civic and the smiles were sharper than knives. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, a playground for the 1% of the 1%. Julian Thorne stood near the ice sculpture, feeling like a target. The rumors Elena had planted were working. He could feel the eyes on him, pitying glances from competitors, hungry stares from investors. They all thought he was a dead man walking. Relax, a voice whispered in his ear. Shoulders back. You're a captain going down with his ship, not a dog being kicked. Julian turned and actually stopped breathing for a moment. Elena was wearing a floor-length gown of emerald silk that clung to her figure like liquid money. It was backless, daring, and utterly sophisticated. Her hair was swept up, revealing the elegant curve of her neck. She looked like royalty. She looked like a weapon sheathed in velvet. "You look—" Julian started, but his voice failed him. "Expensive?" Elena finished, taking a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. "Good. That's the point. We need to look like we're spending our last dimes." "I was going to say beautiful," Julian corrected softly. Elena paused, the glass halfway to her lips. She looked at him, and for a split second the strategist faltered. A flush rose on her cheeks. "Focus, Julian. Target at 3 o'clock." Julian looked. Entering the room, surrounded by a sycophantic entourage, was Silas Sterling. Silas was 60, with silver hair and a tan that came from spending too much time on yachts. He had a face that simulated kindness but eyes that were dead. He spotted Julian and smiled, a predator spotting a wounded gazelle. He walked over, his entourage parting like the Red Sea. "Julian," Silas said, his voice smooth and rich, "I was surprised to see you here, given the unfortunate news about the Von Faust deal." "Rumors, Silas," Julian said, gripping his glass tight. "Just rumors." "Of course," Silas chuckled, placing a hand on Julian's shoulder. It was heavy and patronizing. "But where there's smoke— Look, Julian, I've always liked you. I knew your father. Don't drag this out. Sell to Blackwood tomorrow morning. I can offer you a generous severance. Save yourself the embarrassment of a bankruptcy." Elena stepped forward. She didn't say a word. She just moved into Silas's line of sight. Silas looked at her. His eyes raked over her dress, dismissing her as just another piece of arm candy. But then he looked at her face. He paused. A frown creased his forehead. "Do I know you, my dear?" Elena smiled. It was the same smile she had used on the German industrialist right before she destroyed his son. "I don't think so, Mr. Sterling," Elena lied, her voice pitched slightly higher, softer. "I'm just an admirer of your work. The way you handled the Sterling-Holt merger? Masterful." Silas preened. He loved flattery more than money. "Ah, yes, a difficult business, but necessary." "Whatever happened to that girl?" Elena asked innocently. "The one you blamed. I mean the one who took the fall? Eleanor something?" The air around them froze. Julian watched, fascinated. Elena was poking the bear. Silas's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. Eleanor Vance. A tragedy. Brilliant mind, but corrupt heart. She stole from the very people she was sworn to protect. I tried to save her, but greed is a powerful disease. "It certainly is," Elena said, her voice dropping back to her natural lower register. "It makes people do reckless things, like shorting a logistics company with money they don't have." Silas blinked. The shift in her tone confused him. "Excuse me?" "You heard him," Elena said, stepping closer, her voice hardening. "Mr. Thorne isn't selling. Not tomorrow, not ever." Silas laughed, harsh and barking. "Listen to me, little girl. By noon tomorrow, Thorne Industries will be trading for pennies. I will own the building you're standing in. Julian, keep your mistress on a leash." Julian stepped forward, his fist clenching, but Elena put a hand on his chest to stop him. "We'll see who owns who at noon, Silas," Elena said. Silas sneered. "I'm going to enjoy evicting you first." He turned and stormed off, pulling his phone out, presumably to order his brokers to double down on the attack. He took the bait. Julian exhaled, his heart racing. "He's angry. He's going to dump everything into the short." "We have him," Elena said, but her hand was shaking slightly. "Are you okay?" Julian asked, taking her hand. "That man," she whispered, staring at Silas's retreating back. "He looked me in the eye and lied about ruining my life. He didn't even blink." "He won't be smiling tomorrow," Julian promised. "Let's get out of here. We have a war to win." They turned to leave, but the crowd suddenly parted again. A hushed murmur went through the ballroom. "Oh no!" Elena breathed. Walking toward them was Heinrich von Faust. And he wasn't alone. He was with his son, Stefan, the one Elena had humiliated at the restaurant. Stefan spotted Elena instantly. His eyes widened. He grabbed his father's arm and pointed. "Father, that is her!" Stefan shouted, his voice carrying over the music. "That is the waitress, the one who insulted us!" The room went silent. People turned to stare. Silas Sterling, who had been near the exit, stopped and turned back. Heinrich von Faust marched toward them. He looked furious. "Mr. Thorne!" Heinrich boomed. "What is the meaning of this?" Julian stepped in front of Elena. "Herr von Faust, this is—" "I know who she is," Stefan interrupted, stepping forward with a sneer. "She is a servant, a waitress at Le Ciel, and now she is dressed up like this? Is this a joke to you, Thorne? You bring a waitress to negotiate with kings?" Silas Sterling walked back toward the group, sensing blood in the water. "A waitress?" Silas asked, looking at Elena with renewed interest. He squinted, the gears finally turning. The facial structure, the voice, the intelligence. He looked from the waitress accusation to the woman in the green dress. And then, the recognition hit him like a physical blow. "My God!" Silas whispered, his face draining of color. "Eleanor?" The secret was out. Elena stood exposed in the center of the ballroom. Stefan was laughing. Heinrich looked confused. Silas looked like he had seen a ghost. Julian looked at Elena. She looked cornered. This was the moment where she should run. This was the moment where the shame should take over. Instead, Elena Vance threw her head back and laughed. It was a clear, ringing sound that silenced the room. She stepped around Julian. She looked at Stefan. She looked at Heinrich. And finally she looked at Silas. "I am not a waitress," Elena announced, her voice projecting to the rafters. "I am the Chief Strategy Officer of Thorn Industries." She turned to Heinrich von Faust. "Herr von Faust," she said in perfect German, "ich trage vielleicht heute Abend Seide statt einer Schürze, aber mein Verstand ist derselbe. Und der Vertrag, den wir unterzeichnet haben, ist immer noch bindend. Oder wollen Sie vor all diesen Leuten zugeben, dass Sie Angst vor einer Frau haben? Mr. von Faust, I may be wearing silk instead of an apron tonight, but my mind is the same, and the contract we signed is still binding. Or do you want to admit in front of all these people that you are afraid of a woman?" Heinrich stared at her. His mustache twitched. Then a slow, booming laugh erupted from his chest. "She has fire!" Heinrich roared, slapping his knee. "I like her! Stefan, shut up! She is twice the man you are!" Heinrich turned to the crowd, raising his glass. "Thorn Industries has the full backing of the Von Faust Group! We are partners!" The room gasped. The rumor of the deal falling through, the rumor Silas had bet his entire fortune on, was proven false in real time. Silas Sterling dropped his phone. It hit the marble floor with a crack. He looked at his screen, where the pre-market algorithms were already reacting to the news. The trap had snapped shut. "You!" Silas pointed a shaking finger at Elena. "You set me up." "Hello, Silas," Elena said, stepping close enough to whisper in his ear. "Karma is a bitch. And she speaks German." Silas turned and ran. He actually ran from the ballroom, scrambling to call his brokers to stop the bleeding. But everyone in the room knew it was too late. Julian looked at Elena. The adrenaline was coursing through him. He had never seen anything so magnificent in his life. "We did it," he said. "Not yet," Elena said, her eyes dark. "We broke his bank account. Now we break him." She turned to leave. "I'm going to the office. I want to be there when the market opens." "Elena, wait," Julian called out. She stopped. "Tonight," Julian said, "you were." "Efficient?" she asked with a smirk. "Perfect," he said. They held each other's gaze for a second too long for it to be just business. "See you at the office, boss," she said, and walked out, leaving the most powerful men in New York staring at her wake. The war room at Thorn Industries was silent, save for the hum of the cooling fans on the server racks. It was 9:29 a.m. 1 minute before the New York Stock Exchange opened. Julian Thorne stood at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the massive wall of monitors. On his right stood Elena Vance. She had traded the evening gown for a sharp charcoal business suit, but the aura of command remained. "Heart rate?" Julian asked, half joking. "Steady," Elena replied, though her fingers were tapping a silent rhythm on the mahogany table. Silas leveraged everything on the opening bell. He's expecting a 20% drop. He's about to get a rocket ship to the sun. 9:30 a.m., the bell rang. The screens flickered. For a split second, the numbers held. Then, the press release hit the wires. Thorne Industries confirms $4 billion partnership with Von Faust Group. Stock buyback initiated. The graph didn't just move. It teleported. Thorne Industries opened at $45. Within 10 seconds, it was at $60. 20 seconds later, $75. 1 minute later, $92. "There it is," Marcus, the CFO, shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Look at the volume. That's Blackwood. They're trying to cover." Silas Sterling, having bet that the stock would fall, was now legally obligated to buy shares to return the ones he had borrowed. But everyone else was buying too. The supply was gone. The price was vertical. "He's being margin called," Elena said softly. "The banks are liquidating his positions to pay for the losses. He's burning." By 10:15 a.m., Thorne Industries was trading at $140 per share. Blackwood Capital had lost $3 billion in 45 minutes. They were insolvent. The phone on the center of the conference table rang. It was a direct line. Julian looked at Elena. She nodded. He put it on speaker. "Thorne," a voice rasped. It was Silas Sterling. He sounded like he had aged 20 years since the gala. "Stop it. Stop the buyback. You're killing us." "That's how markets work, Silas," Julian said coldly. "You made a bet. You lost." "I can offer you a deal," Silas pleaded, his smooth veneer completely gone. "I have assets. I have the Asian portfolio. I can—" "I don't want your portfolio," Elena interrupted. Her voice was crystal clear. There was a long silence on the other end. "Eleanor?" "It's Elena," she corrected. "And I don't want your money, Silas. I want the servers. Specifically, the encrypted drive in your personal safe, the one labeled Alpha 1. I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do," Elena said. "That's where you keep the real ledgers. The ones that show you embezzled the pension fund 4 years ago. The ones that prove you forged my signature on the transfer orders." "If I give you that," Silas whispered, "I go to prison." "You're going to prison anyway," Elena said mercilessly. "The SEC is already in your lobby, Silas. I called them 20 minutes ago. But if you give me the drive voluntarily, maybe they'll let you keep your watch. I know how much you like appearances." There was a sound of a door being kicked open in the background on Silas's end, shouting, "FBI! Step away from the desk!" The line went dead. Elena let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 4 years. Her shoulders slumped slightly. "Did you really call the FBI?" Julian asked. "Of course." Elena smiled tiredly. "I told you I'm efficient." The room erupted in cheers. The board members were high-fiving. Marcus was popping champagne. But Julian and Elena stood still amidst the chaos. "Come with me," Julian said. He led her out of the war room, down the hall, and into his private office. He closed the door, shutting out the noise of the victory. He walked over to his desk and picked up a tablet. "Blackwood Capital is being dissolved. As of 10 minutes ago, Thorne Industries acquired their physical assets for pennies on the dollar, including the servers." "So it's over," Elena said, looking out the window at the Manhattan skyline, the same skyline that had rejected her. "I can prove I'm innocent. I can get my license back." "You can," Julian agreed. He moved closer to her. "So, the question is, what now? You have your 5% of the acquisition. You're a rich woman, Elena. You can go anywhere. Paris, Tokyo. You can open your own firm." Elena looked at him. She thought about the last 48 hours, the adrenaline, the trust, the way he had looked at her at the gala, not as a tool, but as a partner. I tried running away. You can away, Elena said softly. I spent 3 years hiding in an apron. I'm tired of running. Good, Julian said, because I have a vacancy. He gestured to the empty office next to his, the one connected by a glass door. Chief Strategy Officer, Julian said. Real salary this time, full benefits, and no one will ever ask you to fetch coffee again. Elena smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, lighting them up. I don't know, Mr. Thorne. I make a pretty good espresso. I'll risk it, Julian said. He held out his hand. Elena looked at his hand, the hand that had pulled her out of the shadows. She took it. Deal, she said. Julian didn't let go. He pulled her slightly closer. The business talk faded. The tension that had been building since that first spilled water at Le Ciel finally snapped. You know, Julian whispered, I think I owe you dinner. And this time, we're not going to talk about business. And no translators? Elena teased. No translators, Julian promised. Just us. As they stood there high above the city, the ticker on the screen behind them flashed green, but neither of them was looking at the numbers. They had already closed the most important deal of their lives. And that is how a simple waitress brought a billionaire empire to its knees, only to build it back up stronger than ever. It turns out, the person serving your coffee might just be the smartest person in the room. Elena Vance lost everything because of a lie, but she regained it all through courage, intelligence, and a little bit of karma. Silas Sterling learned the hard way that you can steal someone's money, but you can never steal their talent. What did you think of Elena's revenge? Would you have forgiven Julian for being so arrogant at the beginning? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a dramatic story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.